Christ the Lord is born. And that sounds like a good thing. But Unitarian Universalists, for better or worse, want to know, what does that really mean for us? The number one thing to know about that phrase is that trying to answer that question is to fall down one of the great rabbit holes of Western thought. It is so complex and so confusing. It is perfect to be used by nefarious purposes, by people seeking power and influence. And so it has. Just as the Jewish people invented guilt and unleavened bread, so they also invented the basic concept behind the idea of Christ, which is a Latin translation for the Hebrew Messiah, meaning the anointed one. And right in that phrase, the Messiah, one puts the lie to the fact that anyone can really interpret the Bible literally. Because the Messiah means the anointed one. It means one anointed with oil. In that culture, the anointed one was sort of like getting your hair all fixed up nice. Because they didn't have Brill cream or whatever they were using. But brides specifically would be anointed with oil on their wedding day. It was when you were the very special person, you were the anointed one. So the Messiah doesn't mean that the Jewish people for millennia have been waiting for someone whose hair is really nicely fixed. That's symbolic for a great leader who would be the anointed one. Now, this Messiah was to be a special person for a really, really big event. Nothing less than really the salvation of the Jewish people. But then again, nobody ever really defined exactly what that salvation would be. What it would be like and what it would feel like, or if it would ever come there. But it's clearly that the Jewish people felt in many instances in their history that they were in need of salvation from all sorts of things, because the Jewish people were often in a lot of trouble. In their origins, they were in captivity, they were a small tribe or a small collection of tribes, often defeated and treated terribly by the larger, stronger tribes in the area. Plus, they lived in a part of the world that was a very difficult place to live. So, yeah, I could see why they would want somebody to save them, some sort of leader. But keep in mind what a great leader this Messiah should be, since they already had some pretty good ones. They had Abraham and David and Moses, and just what those three people managed to do for their people over the course of that's. So if the Messiah is somebody better than those three guys, wow, that's a real big deal. But at no point, at any place in the Old Testament or in any Jewish thought since then was the Messiah supposed to be anything other than a human being. It would have been, and would still be to this day, the greatest of blasphemies to suggest that the Messiah would have been anything other than a great human leader. But even with that, looking forward to that great human leader, it was uncertain exactly how or when he would come, or how we would know when he did, but we did know for sure that it would be a he. To vastly oversimplify the debate, the Messiah would come either when he was most needed and the Jews were most desperate, or on the other hand, when the Jewish people were most devoted, most faithful, and most deserving. In any case, the Jewish thought does agree that the Messiah would come when there was a time of tremendous extremes. But then when he didn't come during the Holocaust, it was like, so there's more suffering out there that's worse? Well, anyhow, over the centuries, a number of men were considered possibly to be the Messiah, or claimed to be. As a matter of fact, if you Google false messiahs, you'll find some extremely interesting personalities over the course of the centuries. One of which you may be familiar with. It was a young rabbi in the time of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, who was to all accounts a great spiritual teacher. It's not clear that he ever thought he was the Messiah, but it's clear that some of his followers thought he was. And those followers eventually broke away from Judaism and became a popular cult when the Roman Emperor was converted to that religion. His name was Jesus. The religion came to be called Christianity, or the religion of the Messiah. And this religion became very popular and very influential. In fact, it was really the first world religion. It took a little something from Judaism, it took a little something from the Persian religions, it took a little something from Greek and Roman mythology. It attracted both the poor and the powerful, and both contributed greatly to its spread and influence. One of the keys that this new religion took from the Jewish idea of Messiah was to combine it with the older religions of a God that dies and is reborn. In world religions and mythology, there are a number of those. Osiris, Tammuz, Adonis, Attis, Apollo, Dionysus, just to mention a few. So that is, in Judaism, the Messiah was a man who would do the will of God. In Christianity, the Messiah is God. Now, is there evidence in the New Testament that Jesus thought he was the Jewish Messiah, or that he thought he was God? No, there isn't. There are some interpretations that could lead one to believe that, but it's not in the text. As a matter of fact, if Jesus was brought to a court of law and accused of being the Messiah, he would be found not guilty. If indeed he could have gotten a fair trial, which he didn't. But you don't have to be Jewish or Christian or know anything about the Messiah or Osiris to celebrate this season. First of all, many religions celebrate all sorts of useful holidays during this season. So, happy holidays. And many of us who are not Christians enjoy the trappings of Christmas very much. It is a universal hope for peace, inspired by the birth of a child, which requires no supernatural suspension of the belief. What more hope for it there is there in the future than the birth of a child? Remember, Jesus as the Messiah came during a time when the Jewish people were oppressed by a foreign power, reduced to a Roman colony, their freedom taken by a distant and ruthless empire. And so today, it behooves those inspired by the Messiah to recognize current examples of imperial abuse of power. For in Jesus' time, also the Jewish leaders had abdicated their spiritual and temporal power to a greater imperial force and wealth. And here we must remember those false messiahs who might say, I alone can fix it. I am your voice. At a point when a man at the head of a mob is your voice, you have lost your voice. Let us here take solace not from the birth of Jesus, but from one of his most familiar acts, throwing the money changers from the temple. Now, often that is misinterpreted as money lenders, as though Jesus was afraid and against charging interest. Well, the Jewish religion at the time was against choosing interest, so that, or charging interest. So indeed that would have been true, but they weren't money lenders. They were money changers. Because as the people were overtaken by the Roman Empire, the coin of the realm was Roman money. But the only offerings you could make in the temple was with Hebrew money. It was like, well, there were Trump dollars outside, and then there were American dollars inside. And there would have been some people, well-meaning, perhaps even some Unitarians, who were providing the service of exchanging Trump dollars for American dollars. It was a response to a necessity. And Jesus' response was the closest he came to an act of violence that I know of in his life. As he came in and he threw the money changers out of the temple. What he was saying, no collaboration. No collaboration. There are other interpretations of the Messiah by other religions besides Judaism and Christianity. There is a Messiah to come in Islam, but that Messiah will not be a God, more along the lines of a prophet, the way that they think of Moses and Jesus. Eastern religions don't have a Messiah, but both Hinduism and Buddhism do have ideas of reincarnations of great teachers and Buddhists that are to come. I personally appreciate the concept of the Messiah offered by Theosophy. Familiar about Theosophy at all? That's a very interesting religion. It was founded in 1875 by a woman named Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, who, amongst other things, disguised herself as a man to serve in the Russian army. She went around the world. She is one of the first people that we know of to have really traveled through the world to understand the Russian religion and through the Middle East and India and so forth. And she finally came to New York, of course, and founded a religion where she was the main teacher called Theosophy. It's Theos, Sophist, the study of God, not the love of God, the study of God, the wisdom of God, the wisdom of God. And when I started reading her stuff, she has a huge book called Isis Unveiled. It's really one of the first books of comparative religion. And there's still theosophists around, and you can go to their lectures and so forth. But the theosophical idea is the Messiah will come when humanity itself makes the changes necessary for a peaceful and just world. That's my Messiah. That's our Messiah. Finally, that Messiah is not out there, but in here. Neither God nor man, but a life force inside us all. Not just inside the enlightened and the educated, but inside all of us. And this from 1 Kings. Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains, and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind came an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. For after the fire there was a still small